Welcome to the Explainer. This is where we love to dig into old documents and see what stories they can tell us.
So let's just jump right in with a question. How do you even begin to tell the story of someone's life, especially when they died nearly 200 years ago? I mean, think about it. This is long before photographs were a common thing. You'd think without journals or pictures it'd be impossible, right? Well, turns out it's not.
The answer, believe it or not, starts right here. It's buried in this kind of dry legal language from a court document. This was filed in Mercer County, Pennsylvania, right after a man named Daniel Spangler died. And this is our very first clue.
Okay, so this court filing, it actually gives us the end of Daniel's story. It tells us he died without a will. So what we've got here is a mystery, and we have to solve it by working backward from his death. We need to figure out who was this guy? Who were these 8 kids he apparently had? And what on earth happened to his 200 acres of land?
So, for this explainer, we're basically going to become historical detectives. Our evidence isn't going to be fingerprints or DNA, though. Nope. We're using church records, census data, court filings, that kind of stuff. Every single document is like a piece of a giant puzzle. And our investigation, it starts right now.
All right, to crack this case, we have to follow that paper trail all the way back to the very beginning. And for Daniel Spangler, that means heading to the archives in York, Pennsylvania. And look what we find. These church records from the Trinity Reformed Church in York, they give us our first solid facts about his life. We learn he was born in October of 1781 and then baptized just a few days later. And then, at 33 years old, he marries a woman named Elizabeth King. And right away, we hit a snag. It's a really common problem for anyone doing this kind of research. Names just aren't consistent. The official church record says Daniel Spangler with an E, but a family history book calls him John Daniel Spangler with an A. It's a perfect reminder that, these details can change from one document to the next.
So after getting married, Daniel and Elizabeth, they didn't just stay in one place. We can actually follow them by tracking their name in all its different spellings through the U.S. Census. It's like we're watching their growing family move across state lines.
So by 1820, the trail has led them to Winchester, Virginia. Now back then, the census taker didn't write down any names. It was all just numbers, little tick marks and different age brackets. So we can see Daniel and his wife Elizabeth, a young daughter too, but then there's this other person, a boy, somewhere between 10 and 16. His identity? Well, that's a little mystery right there. Okay, fast forward another 10 years. Now they've moved back to Pennsylvania, this time to a place called Sandy Creek Township. And wow, the family has definitely gotten bigger. The census shows Daniel and Elizabeth are now living with 5 young daughters. Imagine that, a house just full of girls.
And then we get to the 1840 census, and we find something that just doesn't make sense. It's a really baffling error. The record shows the family has now grown to 7 daughters and a wife, but it lists 0 adult males living there. 0. We know for a fact Daniel was still alive, so this is just a classic case of human error. It's a great reminder that these documents, as useful as they are, they're not always perfect.
But then, 1850. The 1850 census is a total game changer. Why? Because for the very first time, the government started writing down the name of every single person in the house. And there they are. Daniel, now 68 years old, listed as a farmer. His wife Elizabeth, and their 3 youngest daughters, Rebecca, Louisa, and Margaret, all still living at home. The family picture is finally starting to come into focus.
Okay, so now that we have all this amazing context, this journey from Pennsylvania to Virginia and back again, now we can finally go back to where this whole investigation started. We're returning to those dense, legal court documents filed after he died, just 1 year later in 1851.
And that orphan's court record? It confirms what the census was hinting at. It says Daniel died intestate, which is just a fancy legal word for without a will. Because there was no will, the court itself had to step in and identify all of his heirs. And what did they find? They found he left behind 8 surviving children.
And here they are. This is incredible. For the first time, we're seeing the names of all his daughters together, right here in one document. You can see 5 of them were already married, which is why they have different last names. But the 3 youngest, they were still minors.
And that meant the court was now officially responsible for their inheritance and, for their well-being.
So what was the inheritance? Well, the family's biggest asset, by far, was this 200-acre farm. But the court documents also revealed a pretty big problem. The estate had debts, and those debts had to be paid off before any of the kids could get a penny.
So to cover those debts, what did they do? The court ordered half the land to be sold off. 100 acres went up for public auction, and it sold for $500. Now that might not sound like a lot today, but back then, that was a really significant amount of money.
So get this, after five long years of all this legal stuff, the final balance sheet for the estate was filed. The total value of everything he owned came to $640.57. The total amount paid out for debts and fees, $642.04. Can you believe it? After all that, the entire state was in the red by just $1.47.
So, you might be asking yourself, why this guy? Why have we spent all this time piecing together the life of this one farmer from Pennsylvania? Well, it's because this isn't just some random story we picked out of a history book.
The reason this whole story exists is because the researcher who dug up all these documents, Randall Seaver, did it for a very personal reason. Daniel Spangler is his direct ancestor. He's number 50 on what's called an Oneth-Haffel. That's a kind of genealogical chart. Daniel Spangler was his third great-grandfather.
And this is just so cool. Here's that direct line of descent, traced through 6 generations. It all starts with Daniel, born way back in 1781. Then it passes to his daughter Rebecca. Remember her? She was one of the minors in that court case. And that line just keeps going, all the way down to her great-great-grandson, Randall Seaver, the very person who brought this entire story to light for us.
Daniel Spangler's life is just such a powerful reminder that even so-called ordinary people leave behind this absolutely extraordinary trail of documents. His story wasn't neatly written down in some book. No, it was scattered across census forms, dusty church ledgers, and old court dockets, just waiting for someone, a descendant, to come along and piece it all together. And that really just leaves us with one final thought, doesn't it? What amazing stories of migration, family, and fortune are waiting to be discovered in your family's records.